Thomas Bone, September 5, 1931 to June 3, 2025. VALE. Following the passing of local treasure Tommy T-Bone in June, Tom's daughter, Heather Jameson, provided the diary with an account of his life. How do I sum up the life of Tommy T-Bone? When my husband Glenn first met him, he described him as one of the last human beings, and he certainly was that. Loving husband, doting father, poet, recycler, collector, hoarder, performer, Warrandyte icon, musician, master butcher, poetry reciter, Warrandyte Festival monarch, Scottish archivist, and Australian cultural ambassador. Dad had a rare quality. He could walk into a room full of strangers and have them laughing and conversing with him within minutes. He loved people and they loved him. Early life. He was born September 5, 1931, to Mary and Thomas Bone in the town of Marchglen, Alloa, Clackmannanshire, Scotland. Followed 18 months later by his brother William, Bill to all who knew him. In 1937, they moved to Segsburn Cottages. Times were hard for the Bone family, and when my dad was around 7 years old, his father left the family, which made life even harder. Dad had many stories regarding scrounging for coal pieces for the fire, ration coupons, and the antics he and Bill got up to. He had Bill on the front of his bike, no brakes of course, roaring down a hill. Bill came off, head over heels, and knocked all of his front teeth out. Bill always liked to remind Dad of this, as he had dentures and Dad had a mouthful of beautiful white straight teeth until the day he died. I always wished I had inherited his teeth. He started working as a butcher when he was 14 and a half and stayed in it until he was 67. In Scotland, he delivered meat to Molly and Alf Mueller, who he struck up a good friendship with. They were heading to Australia and suggested that he should do the same. Once his apprenticeship was completed, he decided to become a 10-pound Scot and come to Australia. Although he didn't want to leave his mother, he knew it was love and adventure he was looking for. The 10-pound Scot. He arrived on the Cameronia on September 15, 1952, and stayed in a boarding house. He managed to find Molly and Alfred, who introduced him to a Scottish lady called Nan Hawkins, who took him in. She lived in Box Hill, and it was there he found work at Lloyd's Meats. He loved to dance, and not long after his arrival, he met the love of his life, Ruby Popsy Wagner. She had moved to Warrandyte as a young girl in 1929. She asked him what part of Italy he came from. I guess she wasn't accustomed to the Scottish accent. Of course, he was quite taken aback. "I'm no Italian, I'm Scottish." They often laughed over this. Although Mum was a widow, had 3 young sons at home, and was 15 years older than him, Dad had made up his mind that she was the one for him. The Warrandyte years. They married on November 21, 1953, and it was around this time that they bought the house in Keene Avenue, Warrandyte, where they lived for the next 60 years. Popsy had 3 children from a previous marriage, Roger, Colin and Greg. Not long after they moved to Keene Avenue, they were on bikes going to visit Mum's parents in Pound Bend. Roger was riding his own bike, Mum had Colin on her bike, and Dad had Greg on his. Greg's foot caught in the wheel of the bike, and Dad and Greg hit the road. Dad split his head open and was rushed to the hospital by Warrandyte's taxi driver, Ron Belser. The surgeon said, "Mrs. Bone, you came very close to being a widow again." Lucky for me, he survived. Dad was a collector, perhaps even a hoarder. He started as a boy collecting army buttons, cap badges, cigarette cards, stamps and coins. Living on an acre of land in Warrandyte enabled him to continue his collecting. He visited everyone who drank. Dad wasn't a drinker. He picked up their empties, and there was always a neatly stacked tower of bottles in the backyard. We would visit relatives in Warrigal and always come home with Hessian bags of bottles. He would sing all the way home, "I've got bottles that jingle, jangle, jingle, as I go driving merrily along." When he had enough, the bottle-o would come for them, and he would get some cash to help out. Mum worked in the post office, and in those days the mail came in big canvas bags tied with string and a small piece of lead to seal. Dad would spend Saturday nights cutting the lead off to sell. He would strip wire for the copper, break up anything he could find to make a few extra dollars. He was so patient. He was a recycler before it was a thing. He would comb the footy grounds for cans, bottles, cash, and he would always try the phone box for anything left behind. When he'd return home, he'd say, "There's gold in the streets in Australia. People throw it away." He had 3 stationary engines. He would get them working and take them, one at a time, along with the boards he had made up of old taps, grease guns and spark plugs, to what was called crank-ups. He'd sit all day and yarn with other enthusiasts. He worked at many locations, Warrandyte, Greensborough. He went all the way to St Kilda for a while, in Myers, and he had much pride in his work at the Austin Hospital, where he made some changes to help save money in the kitchen/meat department. Butchers who employed him always made sure he was front and centre in dealing with the customers, and no wonder. One particular day, we recall being at the Yarra Glen Butchers. There were 2 butchers serving, Dad being one. His co-worker asked a woman what she would like to buy. She replied, "Nice of you to ask, but I'm waiting to be served by Tommy, thank you." New Year's Eve first footing was a thing he loved to do for his Scottish friends, the idea being that a dark-haired man would be the first to enter the house after midnight, bringing a piece of coal, shortbread or whiskey as a sign of good luck. It was probably the only time he got to have a wee dram in those early days. He never missed the Anzac Day march through Warrandyte. He joined the National Service at 18 years, where he did his apprenticeship. Being a butcher was a most important job. Songs and music. Dad's love of music was his most treasured time. He started playing harmonica with his brother at an early age. His friend Fred Renton from Wonga Park would call in some evenings with his tea-chest bass and clarinet, along with Mum's beautiful soprano voice, and they would laugh and play their hearts out. He had a wonderful memory for songs. He particularly loved comical tunes like Cigarettes and Whiskey or Mule Train. He joined the Warrandyte Senior Citizens when he was about 55. The audience always got a laugh out of Tommy, lifting his kilt while singing "Donald, Where's Your Trousers?" and he loved to cross-dress in skits such as 2 Little Girls in Blue. He would sing a duet with Mum, always looking adoringly into her eyes, and of course, his harmonica playing. He also taught many others to play. He loved to play at the Scout stall at the Warrandyte Market, and many will remember him playing outside the IGA. He also loved his poetry and was a member of the Henry Lawson Society, where he made many friends who loved him to bits. He could recite many poems off by heart. The Shearer's Dream, The Spider by the Gwyder, The Shearer's Nightmare, the shearer who shore his missus in his sleep, There's Another Blessed Horse Fell Down, Out of the London Fog, and the list goes on. If Tom had a mantra to live by, it might have been something like this: keep a poem in your heart, a song in your soul, some collectibles in the shed, treat everyone as if they were your long-lost brother.